about fat loss. Talked about shiver-induced fat loss. We talked about NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, for increasing caloric burn and fat oxidation. And we talked about how to use cold specifically to enhance fat loss. I described a protocol involving getting into cold of some sort, whether or not it's ice bath, cold shower, some form of cold. It could even be a river or an ocean if you have access to that, and inducing shiver and then getting out, not crossing your arms or huddling, but allowing that cold to evaporate off you and continuing to shiver and then getting back into the colder environment of water or stream or shower, etc. All of that is described in a beautifully illustrated protocol that I didn't illustrate. That's why it's beautifully illustrated at thecoldplunge.com. They've made that protocol for you and they've made it available free of charge for you. So there's no obligation there of any kind financially. You can go to thecoldplunge.com. There's a little tab that says protocols, and you can download that protocol. Someone there, I don't know who exactly illustrated it, and you can come away with a PDF of what I described in the previous episode. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of that resource. The other announcement I'd like to make is that many of you have asked how you can help support the podcast, and there's a very straightforward, zero-cost way to do that, and that's to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, if you're not already there watching this now, hit the subscribe button. That helps us tremendously to get the word out more broadly about the podcast, and we thank you for your support. Most people, when they hear the word muscle, they just think about strength. But of course, muscles are involved in everything that we do. They are involved in speaking. They are involved in sitting and standing up. They are involved in lifting objects, including ourselves. They are absolutely essential for maintaining how we breathe. They're absolutely essential for ambulation, for moving, and for skills of any kind. So when we think about muscle, we don't just want to think about muscle, the meat that is muscle, but what controls that muscle. And no surprise, what controls muscle is the nervous system. The nervous system does that through three main nodes of control, areas of control. And I've talked about these before on a previous podcast, so I will keep this very brief. Basically, we have upper motor neurons in our motor cortex. So those are in our skull. And those are involved in deliberate movement. So if I decide that I'm going to pick my pen up and put it down, which is what I'm doing right now, my upper motor neurons were involved in generating that movement. Those upper motor neurons send signals down to my spinal cord, where there are two categories of neurons. One are the lower motor neurons, and those lower motor neurons send little wires that we call axons out to our muscles and cause those muscles to contract. They do that by dumping chemicals onto the muscle. In fact, the chemical is acetylcholine. I've talked before about acetylcholine in the brain, which is vitally important for focus and actually can gate neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change in response to experience. But in the neuromuscular system, acetylcholine released from motor neurons is the only way that muscles can contract. Now, there's another category of neurons in the spinal cord called central pattern generators, or CPGs, and those are involved in rhythmic movements. Anytime we're walking or doing something where we don't have to think about it to do it deliberately, it's just happening reflexively. That's central pattern generators and motor neurons. Anytime we're doing something deliberately, the top-down control, as we call it, from the upper motor neurons comes in and takes control of that system. So it's really simple. You've only got three ingredients. You got the upper motor neurons, the lower motor neurons, and for rhythmic movements that are reflexive, you've also got the central pattern generators. So it's a terrifically simple system at that level. But what we're going to focus on today is how that system can control muscle in ways that make that system better. Now, when I say better, I want to be very specific. If your goal is to build larger muscles, there's a way to use your nervous system to trigger hypertrophy, to increase the size of those muscles. And it is indeed controlled by the nervous system. So you can forget the idea that the muscles have memory or that muscles grow in response to something that's just happening within the muscle. It's the nerve to muscle connection that actually creates hypertrophy. I'll talk exactly about how to optimize that process. In addition, if you want to improve endurance or improve flexibility or suppleness or explosiveness, that is all accomplished by the way that the nervous system engages muscles specifically. And so what that means is we have to ask ourselves, are we going to take control of the upper motor neurons, the central pattern generators, or the lower motor neurons, or all three, in order to get to some endpoint of how the nervous system controls